to Recovery Strategies for Life. We are now entering week 15. We're going to be talking about damaging pain versus healing pain. But we're going to talk about the different ways that our emotional pain can affect and what consequences that pain has on our physical bodies, our emotions, all parts of us.
And also the healing aspect of that, because sometimes we think that all pain is bad, and so we run away from it instead of, in some cases, processing or leaning into it. Kind of like cutting yourself is painful, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But if you have surgery to correct something that's a problem, it's still cutting, it still has the healing process, except that it's for an even more important purpose. And so when we're talking about emotional pain, we're kind of separating those two things: emotional pain that's just destructive versus emotional pain that is for healing, that's actually to help you work through an even bigger problem, right?
Right, absolutely.
Exactly. And there's consequences, though, that we experience if we're trying to avoid that pain and we're trying to shut it down, bury it, push away from it. If we're not leaning into it, there's things that happen, like physical pain. I mean, if our soul is not really into this process and going through that grief like we talked about, then there are physical consequences to that, physical pain that happens. And armoring is one of the things that happens. Evonna, would you tell us a little bit about that from a clinical perspective?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever felt some tension, like in your shoulders or in your neck, and you can feel your body just tensing up. That's our body's way of, it's armoring. It's going into a protective mode. And for me, I, as a kid, would have really bad leg cramps, and part of that was me just tightening those leg muscles up. And I did mine out of fear. A lot of times it was fear of abuse that would cause me to just, my whole body just to constrict.
So it's not a conscious process
not at all.
Right, and for me, I've realized that I would kind of hold my breath and just tighten my whole chest and my body and just tighten up like that. And it was my way of trying to protect myself from emotional pain, from feeling things, because feeling it, expressing it, that had gotten me beaten as a child. So I needed to figure out a way to shut it down. The problem was that shutting it down caused me severe back issues, and it caused me to have muscle spasms and a whole lot of other damage. That was not a good thing, because I couldn't cry, I couldn't express it verbally, I couldn't let it out because I felt unsafe. In that place, I absorbed it into my body, and it caused me a lot of physical damage and pain.
Yeah. I developed tendinitis in both of my shoulders, and when I went to physical therapy for that, I spent 9 weeks getting massaged by my physical therapist and 1 week building muscles, because that's really the base of the problem, was that my muscles were so tense, and it really was because I was not trusting God. And I found, actually, just by taking the time to sit down and say, okay, God, I'm trusting you with this thing that I'm going through, and I'm trusting it, and I'm feeling it, being vulnerable with God, my muscles started to relax, and I haven't had the need to go back for those massages, and I've never had tendinitis after I decided this was the practice I was going through.
And another way that sometimes you will use physical pain for that release of emotional pain is through cutting or burning, those different types of self-harm. And that's one of the things that I had struggled with, just really cutting up on my legs and wanting that emotions to bleed out. And so, and when you cut yourself, your body goes into a pain response like it's supposed to. Your brain is sending the signals that it needs to the different parts of the body to say, hey, there's a problem here. We need to fix this. And so all those releases of the chemicals in my brain actually felt good. It was a release.
Right, and so sometimes we don't realize, we think, oh, well, why would you hurt yourself to deal with pain? Like, that doesn't make any sense to someone who has not experienced that. But for those that have actually walked through that process, understanding the body and the brains and the hormonal response to cope with pain or injury, it's almost a shock response, a milder version when you're dealing with smaller damage like that, but same kind of thing as you run into in a car accident. And so understanding that the problem isn't the that you're doing the harm. The problem is that you're not expressing or dealing with the pain in a healthy way. And therefore you're feeling a need to express it and correct it in a different way, but then you have all the damage that comes with the self-harm. But I know for me, the sickness aspect of it, my immune system would get shot because I was bottling up so much tension and damage and cortisol and all those negative chemicals in my system that I would just get sick, and I would stay sick. Every 2 weeks I was sick for a week kind of thing because my system was so messed up from that bottling everything up and not having a chance to work it through. And so realizing that there's consequences to not working through the pain helped motivate me to start working through the emotional, mental, relational type pain, because it starts damaging your relationships, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it causes that separation between ourselves and others, and even God sometimes. What was that like for you, Ginny?
I had this great cycle that I went through where I would bottle everything up because of the codependency. I couldn't express myself. I had to focus on everyone else's emotions. So then I'd bottle it up, my own. And that would turn into the passive aggressive behavior because it had to go somewhere, so it would leak out in these little nasty ways. And then I would eventually not be able to bottle it up anymore, and I'd have an outburst of anger, and I would just project that onto someone. Unfortunately, they bore my wrath in that moment, but then I would shame myself for what I had done, and I would try and stuff all of those emotions back down again and try harder. This time I'm going to try harder. It's going to be okay. But in the middle of that cycle, I'm unloading onto people. I'm unleashing, and in ways and on people that don't deserve it. And it wasn't actually in response to what was happening, but that broke down all of my close relationships over time. I was never really able to keep any and heal them.
And I would shut down. I would build a wall and I would completely shut down. I would shut down the emotions and I would shut people out. So that really caused an issue with me and my friends even, because even though it wasn't them that had hurt me, if I was feeling any kind of emotion, it was, I got to shut this down. I need to stuff it. Or I would deflect. And then other times I would just really isolate. Like I went through a time where I didn't even want to leave the house. I didn't ever actually have the agoraphobia where I couldn't leave the house, but it was definitely that I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to see anybody. I just want to stay in this safe place where and not allow anybody to come in. And that's really, it's really lonely. And so I was just causing myself more issues, and it came with more consequences, but I didn't know any better. I didn't know how else to handle it.
Right, and there's secrets that we end up keeping because we don't feel safe enough to be real, and we're trying to protect and keep all of that hidden. And then the people who love us are feeling that we're not being honest and transparent and real with them, and that makes them feel left out or betrayed, or it's just such a deep hole when we're unwilling to or unable to process and work through emotion. And I know that shows up most importantly in separation from God. Because if we're not being honest, if we're not being present, if we're not being honest with Him, then it creates a wall there because we are not opening ourselves up to Him coming in and healing and restoring and dealing with that, which that separation from God opens us up to chaos. We don't have that peace that passes understanding. We don't have His grace actively a part of our life, and we're again trying to protect ourselves, and in the process we're actually shoving everything and everyone else, including God, away, and it can get down to the breakdown where we're actually separating ourselves from our own selves. Because if I'm living in an unreal fake identity in a facade and not willing to even connect to my own self because there's pain there, there's damage, there's trauma, then who am I? And identity confusion can come in and so many different damaging things, but that's not where we have to stay.
Right.
Which is a cool thing about this discussion is we're not bringing all this ugly stuff up to make anybody feel worse. What we're wanting to do is identify the damage to help motivate ourselves to step into the healing process, because again, once you've got separation from God and relational damage and all this, where do addictions fit into that, Ginny?
Oh, well, that's going to just want to fill the hole, right? There's this void, and we don't want to ever have that void. It's obviously painful in itself, so we look to see how can we fill this. And a lot of times that's how addictions start, is a habit, because we're trying to fill something. We're trying to be secure and fill that God-sized hole, or that God-shaped hole that we hear about. And that is unfortunately never something that's going to really fill it. It's never going to satisfy. So we just keep going for it and trying out of desperation to bring that in. But it really just masks, or it covers. For me, it was just the wanting to numb out and not feel that pain at all. It was I couldn't see myself coming out of it, so therefore I didn't want to go into it. But once I understood that I could come out of this, and it didn't have to own me and control me, because that's what ends up happening with addictions. You're chained to this thing. You have to consistently go back to it, because you don't know how to live without it. But if we are keeping our connection open with God, and we're asking Him to fill that hole, then we don't have to continue to go back to that addiction consistently. We can be healing that. It's a process, of course, but if we're digging into the pain, then we can also get healing from the pain and move on from the things of the past and the addictions of the past.
Is that just one type of addiction, though?
No, there's lots of them. For me, the addiction was my way, when I would purge, was my way of getting that emotion out. It wasn't so much about the food, and it's really never about the food. It's never really about the alcohol or the chemical or the pornography or the sex. Whatever the addiction is, it doesn't really matter. That, like Ginny was saying, that's what's filling that hole that we really need the Holy Spirit to come in and fill. Depression, borderline personality, schizophrenia, and the one that's the hardest, and something I've struggled with and I've lost friends to, is suicide.
Right, because that's kind of the ultimate place Satan wants to kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah.
And if he can use our fear of pain to steal all of these things, these areas, steal our health, steal our relationships, steal our connection to God, steal our sanity, steal our stability, steal our positive, happy, joyful activities and behaviors and whatever, and just destroy it. Ultimately, his goal is to kill us. Yes. And if he can get us to kill ourselves, that's even better. And it's usually that pain in an ultimate level of damage where you can't, so many people who've attempted suicide, and I know from myself, in that desperate, I hurt too bad to live anymore. If I could just end it, then I wouldn't hurt. And it's a lie.
Right.
Because that doesn't fix anything. We just lose the opportunity to heal and restore and have God come into that healing and restoration. And so recognizing the fact that I tell people with cancer, pretending you don't have a diagnosis, pretending it's not eating you up on the inside, doesn't fix anything.
Right.
You'll die from it. And emotional damage and pain that isn't dealt with is going to do that same thing. It will eat and destroy and damage and continue to escalate in that. It's not just going to magically go away because I ignored it. Instead, like with cancer, you have options of surgery or of treatment of different kinds. You have ways to fight back.
Right.
And so we're talking about the fact that working through the pain and doing the healing side of pain, the healing side of dealing with our past, even though it hurts and even though it's messy, that gives us the option to heal and save our lives and save our relationships and move forward into a healthier place. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to this pain versus pain thing, right?
Right, and as long as you have breath in your lungs, you're still alive, and there's still hope, and things can still change. I had multiple suicide attempts as a teenager and then in college. And so, it was a very real, desperate, the only thing I thought I could do to get away from that emotional pain. But I recently had to go through a pretty major foot surgery, not once, but twice, within 6 months of each other, which was not fun. But I learned,
hurt.
yeah, it hurt. Oh, it hurt real bad. But the pain that happened before surgery was excruciating. I got to the point where the doctor was like, just try swimming. I couldn't even be in a swimming pool where my foot was not, gravity was not present there in that moment, but I still had that excruciating pain. And so we're like, okay, we're going to do surgery. So I went through that physical surgery, but then they put me in a cast for 6 weeks. And when they took the cast off and my foot wouldn't move and I had to go through the physical therapy, I went through that healing pain process. And it wasn't healing correctly, and I slipped and fell, and I had to start the process all over again.
Wow.
But now I'm back to running and exercising, and with very little limitations at all. I'm doing much better than what the doctors even thought I would be able to. But that healing pain versus the damaging pain from the beginning was worth
The process.
The process.
Right. And I think that what Satan loves to do is to shorten our perspective and limit our perspective to that pain point, so that all we can see is the pain and we can't see past it. Now we can see past it when we are asking the Holy Spirit to bring that to us, bring that larger perspective, a God's eye view, if you will, of what's going on. And that's a tactic that the enemy uses against us, but that doesn't have to be where we stay. We don't have to choose to focus on that pain, like focus on what we're lacking, what we don't have, and feeling like there's nothing beyond this. There is something beyond this, most definitely, and we just need to kind of take that wider view and include heaven and eternity and those around us as well.
Which means that we get to choose the healing pain, the surgery version, the physical therapy version of emotional processing and pain. So we get to choose to get help. In my case, going to a counselor and actually getting help to go backwards and find those pain points that I had stuffed and that I had dissociated from and I had stopped processing and I'd bottled up and was doing me all that harm. And to actually go back there in a safe way, in most cases, I recommend doing it with help, whether it is a counselor or a mentor or a friend or a trusted person that's part of your support system that we've been talking about. But actually begin the process of digging up the things that have been bottled up, places of pain where you've had these symptoms and these consequences. And we have strategy 22, which has to do with actually dealing with this. What is that?
Ginny?
The physical release that we've been talking about. Some of the things that I've been mentioning, where it's exercising and dance and kickboxing and even massage is a part of that as well, because our physical body is going to try and hold on to stuff, and that is one of the ways that we can get it out of our system a little bit faster
And healthier.
Yes, not letting it stay there, but getting it out.
That's strategy 22. So we're getting some strategies under our belt, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I think it's because I've sat on the other side of the couch.
Yeah.
It's not so much about being in the counseling chair as much as it is my experience through therapy. And I had two really great therapists. And then there was a couple along the way that I didn't really agree, and I just wasn't a good fit. So if you've tried counseling before, don't completely discount it. Maybe it's just not a good fit. I am not the best therapist for everybody.
Right.
Thank goodness, because that'd be a lot of people I'd have to work with, and I don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
But give it a shot. Give it a chance, and you just never know. Like I said, there are some out there that you just might not connect with, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad therapist. But we all specialize. Like my specialty is in trauma and attachment. Other people might just specialize in grief or marriage. So it all depends on what exactly you're looking for, and you need to know what you're looking for and have those expectations for your counselor out there for them.
Right, and understanding that you don't need to have any shame or embarrassment. I know I
Right.
grew up in a culture where counseling was just taboo. Like, you got to be really, really, really messed up to go to a counselor. So it took a bit of adjusting for me to go, oh, this is kind of like going to a doctor for physical health issues.
Yes.
I can go to a counselor to help me work through and process and recognize and kind of know what's going on in a safe place for the emotional unhealthy areas and perspectives. And another added piece of that is going to be recovery programs, which
Yes.
Ginny, you're our gung-ho for recovery.
Get on
So
board. Go to a recovery program. You're going to be around people that are also working a recovery program. The shame that you might feel is just taken out of that. And I know that I was not sure that I was broken enough for a recovery program. And I thought, oh, are they going to reject me because I was never homeless living under a bridge? Am I broken enough to even be here? But thankfully, every recovery program that I've been to, every meeting that I've been to, whether or not I felt like I really fit in with the people or the issue, I knew that I was welcome because everyone there had openly said, just by being there, I'm broken and I need help, and that's okay. And there was no shame involved in that. So I highly encourage you to go and find the one, again, that's right for you as well. You may need to go to some different options to see which one works for you. Celebrate Recovery is my go-to, my home, because it is Christ-centered, and that's where I feel most at peace and feel like the Spirit is there with us.
Well, I would say even that going to treatment can be that part of that process to healing pain. It was definitely part of my process, but I also didn't think I was broken enough to be there because I obviously was not at the lowest weight, but my body and my heart, my kidneys, all that stuff was telling me a little bit different, that maybe I was pretty sick and I needed to work on some stuff. So that's one. And then there's also what we talked about last week, the grieving process, walking through those stages of grief for every loss that you've been through. What else do we have?
my favorite is verbally processing, usually with a walk and talk, because I want to do the bilateral processing we were talking about before, but getting a chance to talk it out. And sometimes I'm not even aware of what the problem is or what the pain point is, but talking it through helps me sort through a lot of the things and start recognizing what it is. And then depending on the severity of it, then I have a better gauge for, do I need professional help, or do I just need to go do some exercise and work through this, or I need God and I to just do this separately, where it's me and him working it through. But if I don't have any clue what it is, it's kind of hard to know what direction to go with that. But sometimes it's then just going back to those healthy things that we've talked about before, with expressing emotion, expressing even pain through art, for instance, or journaling. Coloring book.
I like to color.
What other kinds of things, Ginny?
I know that when I don't have someone that I can process with immediately verbally, that journaling for me is a big help. And especially when I was in college, when I didn't feel like I really had a whole lot of people that I could talk to in a safe way, I went right to my journal. And it may have started out as a letter to the person that I couldn't really talk to or address yet, or didn't know, was just feeling angsty towards them. So I'd start writing, I feel this, and as I started to write down my feelings, that I started to feel more and more and identify more and more, and eventually it would end up turning into a prayer to God, and in that releasing and asking Him to come in and heal and show me all kinds of different things, and He would remind me of the truth through that.
So an unfiltered, is that what it's called, Evonna? The uncensored. Uncensored, that's what it is. An uncensored letter.
Okay.
Where you're not trying to restrict what you say, like they're
Right.
actually going to get the letter, but you're talking about the kind that you're writing where you're probably going to throw it away or burn it.
Yeah, no, I would
or,
never send this to anybody. This is a journal. It's
Yeah.
going to stay in that journal.
Well, and I did some uncensored letters to a couple of my perpetrators, but I also did an uncensored letter to the scale and to the grief, like to whatever it was what I thought was frustrating me. I could just put it out there, and I did take a couple of those and light them on fire and burn them up, because I don't want anybody to ever find any of that. Because it was just emotions. It wasn't who I was. I think we learned about that. Our emotions are not us.
Yeah.
So,
No, and this is really cool to understand that we're not just talking about pain for pain's sake, or
Right.
being a masochist and wanting pain, though even then when people are wanting to be hurt, wanting to do self-harm, wanting other people to hurt them, it's usually because there's unaddressed internal pain that hasn't actually been expressed or worked through or processed properly. If my foot hurts, what's wrong with my foot? If something else hurts, it's God's way of setting off a warning light that there's something wrong. And in our spirit, in our soul, it's the same thing. Pain is not the problem. Pain is the thing that lets us know there's a problem. And so we're wanting to discuss that, recognizing what pain is, what it's not, and the fact that pain is a real positive thing when we recognize it for what it is, and then we go into the healing process of pain instead of the damaging process of pain that is destructive, that Satan uses to cause us harm and to do damage in all of those earlier ways we were talking about with our body, our soul, our spirit, breach in relationships and all that. Instead, we want to look at the positive side of pain, actually letting ourselves go with help, with support, with love, with a healthy perspective, and go in and work through that pain so that it doesn't have to continue doing us harm on an ongoing basis, right?
yeah, because pain is the symptom. And I like to talk about the way I do counseling is I like to get to the root. Otherwise, that stinking weed is just going to keep growing.
Yeah.
I can pull it out, but it's just going to keep coming up. So we have to get to that root. So this week, as you do your homework, which is going to be, where do you feel the pain? So this week, notice where you're feeling them in your body, because when we can identify where we feel this, then we can say, okay, my heart is racing, I'm feeling fearful. What do I feel fearful? And then we can start to get to that root of what's really causing the pain.
Yep. Because it's all connected. So
Yes.
if we don't know it initially by what we're feeling, because I know I had a whole lot of trouble feeling and understanding, and even today sometimes identifying what I'm feeling. But if I can identify it in my body, that gives me
Right.
a heads up.
Yes.
Wonderful. So good luck walking through that, and we're praying that God gives you the insight that you need into your body and how you react. Have a great and a blessed week.